Hello, hello, hello. Hi. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Gladys Ramirez. I'm the Public Programs Manager here at the Norton Museum. For those of you that haven't been here before, we love welcoming audiences every day, but specifically, I want to shout out Fridays and Saturdays. It is our, sir, come that way. No, go that way. Sorry, they're going to lock it in a moment. I want to shout out Fridays and Saturdays because it's free admission days. Every Friday from 5 to 10, we have my program, Art After Dark. Free music, programming like this, art activities, all ages, all different tastes. So we hope to see you back here soon. We're really excited to have the Cream Literary Alliance here today and the City of West Palm Beach's Office of Sustainability. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to your hosts for the evening, Anne Mallon and Eduardo Condes.
Okay, again, welcome everyone. My name is Eduardo Condes, and this is Anne Mellon. We are both board members of the Cream Literary Alliance, and we have the honor to be here today and present you with some insight about our state on the climate and nature through these talented folks who are going to read and exhibit to you today. And so on behalf of the Cream Literary Alliance, we would like to thank the Norton, the Art After Dark, the City of West Palm Beach, the curating committee, and also a big thank you to you for being here with us. So remember, when things fall apart, let's put them back together, one by one.
The Cream Literary Alliance is a 501c3 nonprofit. We're a group of writers dedicated to promoting the power of the written and spoken word. Some of the presenters were invited here tonight. Our featured artist, Roxanne Darling, our climate activist, Kaya Andrick, and Penny Redford from the city's Office of Sustainability. But the remaining presenters were chosen through a competitive process. Our intern, Sasha Magimikian, was able to take off the names for all submissions, forward it to the curating committee, which was a group of 3 board members. They read the submissions blind, and they scored them according to a rubric. The highest scoring work are the pieces that you'll hear tonight. Congratulations to all. I've asked Eduardo to start us off tonight with a poem. Eduardo Condes was born in Patillas, Puerto Rico, and arrived to the U.S. at the age of 4, firmly planting roots in Chicago, Illinois. He started writing and reading poetry in his sophomore year of high school. He has participated in numerous poetry readings in schools, colleges, universities, bookstores, cafes, festivals, and a prison. He also taught poetry to children in elementary school, and his work has been published in an anthology, Nosotros. He's read poetry on television. He lives in Palm Springs, Florida since 2005 with his wife of 45 years, has 3 grown children, and 5 wonderful grandchildren whom he adores. Eduardo Condes.
Okay, thank you. This is entitled No More Prayers. No more prayers on climate while the U.S. West Coast is burning, while the U.S. East Coast is drowning, and the oceans are surging and churning all over the world. Tears swollen across the ununited states of this America, and no one listens to the song being sung by the wind, and no one listens to all the trees crying in pain and in anger and hungry for hope as they cling to the notion of every motion and lost emotion from Mother Earth as she weeps and keeps us grounded till we become dust or bones broken and swallows us all. No more prayers, please. Just fight for the right to breathe again, pure. Thank you. Our next presenter is Ellis Elliott. Ellis Elliott teaches ballet, yoga, and creative writing at Face Play Center for Arts and Education After School program in West Palm Beach, and is currently working on an MFA at Queen's University in North Carolina. She is mom to 6 grown men and lives in Juno Beach with her husband, Tim. Ellis?
Good evening. My first poem is titled Indifferent.
Summer finally begins to lay down her saber swords of heat in August, just as somewhere in Africa, a magic carpet of Saharan dust rides the trade winds west and starts to settle over the amniotic warm water of the Atlantic. As if the atmosphere needed a better invitation, the wind shear slowly dies and the sea level rises. Moisture lifts and twists into a howling dervish dance, a fevered pitch of swirl and heat never seen before. Now we are indifferent to this ostentatiousness, barely a nod from our striped beach towel on hot sand, slathering sunscreen on to protect us. This one is titled 4 Amulets for a Frightened Floridian. Sea turtle bone. Slip it under your tongue, and you will see inside the domed ceiling of a carapace with painted prophecies of water, the brilliant blue of morpho butterfly wings. You may feel the water's velvet curl as it rises and encircles you. Swaddling comfort lulls like a mother's song as it seeps past your lips, growing wider and deeper until you are lifted up and away by the hymn of the wind. Coral tentacle. Break off a piece the color of the belly of a warty newt at moonrise. Clasp in your hand, palm up. Witness the color drain from your hair and eyes, acid bleached from vivid honey and chestnut to limestone gray. The colors pool at your feet, mixing into roomy variations of pale, and you find your pockets jingle with glittering gold coins. Python tongue. Dry and pulverize to powder, mix with seawater, and drink at low tide on the eve of a storm. Do not glance away from the news channel until you hear the bullhorn on your street. Evacuate to the darkened beach. Dive in, waves and reappear. Monstrous muscles slither as you coil and constrict your forked tongue around the eye wall of the storm. Egret egg. On starless nights, certain eggs, the color of a long-tailed parrot, become warm. The concentrated cauldron of heat expands until they whistle like tea on the stove. When you hear the high-pitched notes pierce the air, you will become flushed, your cheeks like a scarlet ibis, and the sting of salty sweat will fill your nose, ears, and eyes until you can no longer smell the sizzle of your skin. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Amy Dahan. Amy Dahan's love of the outdoors led to a career path through commercial fishing, construction management, and professional gardening to eventually become the director of Heathcote Botanical Gardens and a champion of environmental education. Amy has been a Treasure Coast resident since 1983 and a student of Tai Chi Chuan for over 20 years. She currently lives and plays in Stuart, Florida. Amy Dahan.
Thank you. I live in a little condo community, and as I walk, I take note of what I see. So I submitted an entry from the Vista Diary. Walk like a cat is one of the classic principles of Tai Chi Chuan, the graceful, slow-moving exercise form that originated in China. I practice Tai Chi and walking meditation to maintain my health and to clear my mind. I live in a condominium community, and I practice outdoors to connect to the energy of the natural world. Today, as I was walking back from my morning Tai Chi practice by the lake, I was pondering the principles that are beginning to reveal themselves after many years of practice. Walk like a cat. Suddenly, I am stopped by two eyes riveted on mine. Less than 10 yards away, a big bobcat sits on the culvert at the end of the community lake. She is perched like a large domestic cat might sit in a garden, comfortably down on her haunches. The direction of her body tells me she was watching the culvert until she swiveled her head to look at me. Her face is so much like a domestic tabby cat, I might mistake her for a house cat, except for her size. She is bigger than the biggest house cat I've ever seen, which is Tank. Tank is a 27-pound domestic that lives with my niece and is not allowed to go outside. This cat lives in the woods that are shrinking rapidly in my Florida town. There are numerous 10 or 20 acre tracts within a few miles of here that have been cleared for construction this year. Where will all the wildlife go? In my community, I see a lot of battles between mockingbirds and blackbirds this year, more than usual, I think. Are they battling for turf? A mockingbird needs about an acre of territory to feed and nest. How many nesting sites have we lost? The trees being felled as acres are cleared must contain precious nests and eggs and all the bugs and the berries that the birds and the various critters feed upon. Back to the cat. She is still looking at me with unblinking eyes. I'm surprised she hasn't bolted back into the ferns. Is she friendly? Hungry? She looks healthy and stocky, not like some of the tufted, scrawny wildcats I've seen before. Some of them look more like jackrabbits with bony legs, long faces, mangy fur. A fearless wild animal is a dangerous wild animal, my Girl Scout brain reminds me. No, this cat looks too composed. Rabid looks deranged and restless. I take a few more steps, and she watches me intently. Then she springs back toward cover, and I admire her mottled pelt, her muscular haunches, her fluid movement. Behind a small rise on the stream bank, she pauses to stare at me again. Her ears straight up, her big eyes round in her golden face. Then she leaps into the ferns, and she is gone. I hear a crow complaining above, but no sound in the underbrush. Walk like a cat. I cautiously walk over to the culvert and look down to see what she was seeing. Nothing but muddy water at this moment. I back away and resume my walk, one eye on the woods. A walking meditation. So hum. A Sanskrit mantra meaning I am that. A great mantra for examining oneself, a mantra that invites one to identify with the universe. So hum, I am that. As I walked the paved path back to my condo, I passed the undeveloped edges of our community. A small rabbit scurries into the native bracken fern that spills out of the adjoining wilderness. It is a very small wilderness of palmetto, cabbage palm, and longleaf pine that has been approved for development of another apartment complex. So hum, walk like a cat. Thank you.
All right. Our next presenter or reader is going to be Laurie Kuntz, an award winning poet and film producer. She worked as an educator in Japan, the Philippines, Thailand, and Brazil. Many of her poems reflect working with Southeast Asian refugees. Her published works include one poetry collection, Somewhere in the Telling, two poetry chapbooks, Simple Gestures and Women at the Onsen, and in English as a second language reader, The New Arrival. Laurie?
Thank you. I lived in Japan for many years, and I was in Japan during the March 2011 tsunami and earthquake. And my first two poems are based on truth and based on the experience of living through that earthquake and tsunami. And the first poem is called A Basket Set on the Shore, remembering the March 2011 tsunami, Japan. An ordinary day until it wasn't. Go up, they said, to higher ground. Her body was never found, disappearing from the rooftop, the closest place to heaven. Years later, a mother still searches. Rebuilding a life becomes routine, and daily the ocean reminds her. Her daughter's days were far from extraordinary, but gentle like the tide during a crescent moon. She makes an offering each evening, salted plums, bean cakes, ginger tea, placing each item in a basket set on the shore. And as morning has no geography, heading home, her back to the rising tide, she does not watch as the sea eats. Thank you. Fukushima Daiichi power plant, nuclear power plant, was destroyed during the tsunami, and it released radioactive materials all over. And it caused genetic and physiological damage to the blue butterfly, which was native to that area. And so this poem is called The Blue Butterfly of Fukushima. And I'm going to start it off with an epigraph, a quote by Xiangxi, the Chinese philosopher, and I probably pronounced his name wrong, but Xiangxi, the Chinese philosopher, said, I do not know whether I was then a man dreaming I was a butterfly, or whether I am now a butterfly dreaming I am a man. The Blue Butterfly of Fukushima. Within a year, the blue butterfly changed, barely noticeable, yet the wing spread limited, the markings on the underbelly a faded hue, shorter antennae, dented eyes, its pale grass blue color muted. The butterfly flies, but within boundaries, much more like man now, fading to blue in an endless sky. Okay, I'm going to end with a hopeful poem. I know those first two were a little bit like, okay, things fall apart. But I'm going to end with a hopeful poem. In LA, in Los Angeles this past winter, it was an unusually wet winter, and it was a very cool February, and it ended the drought that they've had for many years. And it caused the super bloom of flowers, and that caused the early migration of the painted lady butterflies. And my son lives in LA, and he sent me a video one day. He was just walking down his street, and he was suffocated by butterflies. And it was just an amazing video with butterflies all over. And I'm sure many of you have seen, in pictures in the paper and stuff. So this poem is from about that. And I call it a hopeful poem, but I'm not a scientist and I don't know that much about, I'm not a climate change expert. So I call it a hopeful poem, but maybe a scientist finds it less than hopeful because maybe those butterflies shouldn't have been that early in LA or that many in LA. But anyway, it's a hopeful poem for me. It's called Butterflies and Sirens, and it's a response to the sudden migration of painted lady butterflies to Los Angeles in the spring of 2019, which marked the end of the drought. I was there for the rain, but left before the early bloom of nettles and mallows, was absent when the angel-voiced siren of Los Angeles taunted the painted ladies north to feast on lupins and milkweed, everywhere a cloak of orange, their black wing-tipped eyes staring down at the amazed denizens, while skimming by buildings and bike racks and bus horns blazing, hundreds in midday light, hovering, while the sirens of the city blared through this place of comings and goings, drawing all to look closer at the shock of arrival, the surprise of flight, and a noon epiphany, the sirens' calls announcing the end of the drought. Thank you.
When the idea for this evening first whispered in my head, I thought of Roxanne Darling. I met Roxanne in 2015 when she lived in town, temporarily caring for her aging mother. She helped us at our first nonprofit event, the Cream Literary Alliance, and she volunteered to be our tech support. While she is a highly consummate business professional, it is her artwork that inspires me. Not only does Roxanne explore her personal relationship to nature, but she also challenges the viewer to find comfort with the feminine form. Her courageous and intimate encounters with Mother Earth ask for more than a deeper acceptance of female qualities in all of us, no matter our gender. Her work asks us to honor ourselves, our bodies, as part of the natural world. We humans have forgotten that we and nature are one. And only by recognizing this can we begin to solve the problems of climate change. Roxanne Darling is an artist and writer living in Santa Fe, New Mexico. She works in various media, including photography, ink drawing, painting, and conceptual installation. Words are important to her, so they often play a role in her art. She has worked in many diverse professions which feed into her creativity as an artist. She's interested in the restorative powers of nature and how nature deficit disorder affects the ways we treat ourselves, each other, and our environs. Please welcome our featured presenter, Roxanne Darling.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me here. It really means a lot to me, so thank you all for being here. I want to read to you first my project statement for this artwork that I've put together. I have about 35 images that I've collected over the last couple of years. And then I'll show you a few images and I'll read a few of my, what I call poemettes. They're sort of a waft of words, nothing too serious, nothing too long, nothing too deep, but hopefully words that will help you have a memory that will grow into something as a result of seeing the images. I Am for the Love of Nature are nude self-portraits composed in the Western United States at ages 63 through 66. On the surface, they explore the solitude of the unoccupied landscape. And in earlier times, playing in nature provided solace for me from during and after childhood traumas. Women in nature have a lot in common. They are both desecrated and revered. I'm not used to reading. These wild places encouraged me to explore personal and universal themes: consumerism, debasing the things that we love, and the issues of waste, trash talk, merchandising, and equating old and abused with useless. In the remote and quiet expanse of nature herself, unearthing power and the present, I listen. So my theme tonight is listening. Forgot to start this. I didn't mean to turn it off. There we go. There we go. So, for many of us, it's very natural to care for the people and things that we love. And so I hope that tonight, as I share my love of nature, which I really believe nature saved my life on many occasions, that I will inspire you also to love nature and therefore care for her. So I'm often asked about how this project got started, and I only recently realized it started here. This image is not usually in the work that I show, but this image was taken on the afternoon of my mother's funeral. We had come back to the hotel and taken a walk around this lake, and sidebar, I want to shout out to my partner Shane, who tolerates my eccentricities. But I had an urge to take my clothes off and take a picture here. And so that's what we did. And that's really the story of this body of work, is they are urges from nature saying, stop here, listen here, pay attention here. And I felt very much that this was my mother's spirit passing, saying, now that I'm gone, now that your father's dead, you are free to be you. And so that's very much how I experience this particular image. Curiously enough, she didn't leave me up a creek without a paddle. She, in fact, showed me a paddle and a boat. So I took that, I love metaphor, and so I took that as a sign. So this image that we're using for the event that Anne picked, thank you, almost all of the images were inspired by this moment when I had this overwhelming urge to take my clothes off and take a photograph. So we were walking down the beach in Puget Sound, and I saw this container ship going by, and hopped up on the rock. We took the photo, and it was about a year later when I was sitting going through the images, and I asked this image, what is it you're trying to say here? And the moment I asked the image, it became very clear. I'm saying goodbye to my merchandise self. And this is something that certainly all of us women understand, of having our bodies used to sell things from the beginning of time. So I'd like to read the poem that I wrote to go along with this one. And I made my PowerPoint way too complicated here. I never imagined I could feel so full of my own soul as to dwarf a container ship packed dense with goods and bads, ferrying stuff I no longer want and largely never needed. There were times I thought this impedimenta could salvage me from the trash talk I buried myself in. Bye-bye layers of masks and shiny distractions. Bye-bye all the roles I once wore to impress others or sell ideas. I'm staying naked to welcome the wind whispering to me, and I like the feeling of freedom on my skin in the morning. Thank you. You don't have to stop, and we'll just keep going. Thank you. As a child, in one of the places that we lived, we grew up a lot growing up, but in one place, ages first grade through third grade, we had woods behind our house. It was now suburbia, but at that time it was undeveloped. And I would go out into the woods and take my clothes off down to my underwear, and there would be these giant leaves and vines, and I would make clothing for myself. And it was a great sort of respite for me. As a college student, I was an environmental activist, and I've been hugging trees for decades, I consider them some of my closest friends. So when my partner and I started a hike in the ancient redwood forest, I saw this tree laying there, and I had that urge. um, but it was 300 yards from the entrance to the parking lot. And so even though it's legal to be nude in the national parks, FYI, for anyone who might be interested, I didn't want to risk offending anyone who might be coming upon us. So we kept walking, and we walked for over an hour, and I found plenty of additional fallen trees, but none of them spoke to me the way this one did. So I will read the words that I wrote for this one. Resting in the redwoods. As I entered the old-growth forest, the wood nymphs whispered my name. I kept walking. They kept talking. Here now, I asked. What are you waiting for? They answered. This is the present. So it's okay. So I have a college degree in science, and I love science. And if you have a chance to watch The Secret Life of Trees on YouTube, I highly recommend it. Some of you have already watched it. Or just watch the old Lord of the Rings where the trees talk to each other. Well, the scientists have now found that there are these fungal systems in the dirt that allow the trees to connect and communicate with each other, even unrelated trees. So it's not a root touching a root, but a root touching a fungus that's touching another root, and having these conversations deep under the soil. So I like to think that you too, can go into the woods, learn about nature, learn about ourselves. Nature is how I found myself. One of the first things learning that I love nature. And finally, at this age, appreciating that and allowing it to go forward. Some of you may also know this Japanese term Shinrin Yoku, which means forest bathing. And I didn't know this term when we were out in our RV, but it clearly speaks to the work. And, as I like to say, go into the woods, take a bath, and of course, to get really clean, you would take your clothes off, because that's what you do at home. And nature is my home. Here are just a few of the things that they have found. Again, scientifically, they've measured these things, changes that happen in the body when you spend time in the forest, in nature. So I hope you'll find time to go out in nature. I'm just going to read this poem to you. This one is called Like the Moth That Depends on the Tree. The female yucca moth pollinates the Joshua tree, laying her eggs in the flower's ovaries. Those little eggs hatch and feed on the yucca seeds. Neither would exist without the other. Nature can exist without me, I know, but not I without her. I want to be part of this cycle of sharing, of blooming, of mutual dependency, of feasting in the wild. Nature is my safe word. Nature is my safe place. Safe space. I found this quote by Anne Lamott recently. I follow her on, on Twitter. And, oops, we lost our little connection here again. And it really spoke to me. I'll read it since we're recording this. My family's fixation on our finite natures, our appearance, our standing, our grades and weight, bred judgment, anxiety, and blame of others and of ourselves. So this business of listening has a catch. We have to be aware of who we're listening to and filter out the voices that are not the ones that are really in our best interest. And somewhere I've lost an image on the side of that, but we'll let it go. So, I was considered the rebel in our family of 4 daughters. But even still, even though I ran away a few times, I went to college at UC Berkeley, I protested the Vietnam War, I was a good rebel. But I was still really hard chasing perfection, no matter what I did. So it was important to be a good and perfect protester and a good and perfect daughter, especially when visiting my parents here in Palm Beach. But as you can imagine, it's exhausting. It's too much work trying to do all of that. So I quit. And that's when I developed my listening skills of learning to trust my own instincts, learning to trust what I hear in nature, and it's the little things. So for example, when I was preparing for this talk a couple of months ago, one of my first thoughts, being who I am and where I come from, I have to go buy a new outfit, right? Everyone can relate. And so, okay, file that. I don't do it now, I'll do it later. And then as the time approached, I started, having that thought because my little to-do list mind was saying, it's time to go buy that new outfit. And every time I would try to map out in my brain the cute little shops in Santa Fe where I live, my brain would sort of get scrambled. And then I realized, wait a minute, you're going to talk about saying goodbye to your merchandise self. Why don't you just drop that and find something in your closet? So I'm wearing a handmade outfit from an artist on Molokai, and I didn't have to buy anything new, so I'm very excited. So I don't know if any of you saw this recent drama. The Duchess of Cambridge was caught wearing the same blue coat 4 times. And so, of course, on Twitter, it was very funny. She says, I've been wearing the same pants for 8 years. Another person, if I had that coat, I'd sleep in it and I'd get the mail in it. And I wear the same blue shirt to work every Wednesday. So a lot of us maybe don't realize, but the fashion industry is one of the biggest polluters and causing a lot of environmental issues. Forever 21 just went out of business, went bankrupt, and that's probably a good thing because this notion of fast fashion, buying things that you wear a few times and throwing them away is really, really a strain and tension on our environment. So that's my little bit of comedy that I threw in here. So speaking of old things, wearing your old clothes, I have a last poem that I want to read to you. And this one is called Discussing Age at Sunset with a Saguaro. I learn the saguaro stands still, singular and self-contained, for up to 90 years before growing an arm. I mention that I've often felt like a puppet, too many arms tangling in things I don't really care about. Oh, I forgot to give you the words. Sun setting, tucking my arms in, still standing, still listening. So I want to thank you for listening to me, and I've created a little 2-minute meditation movie with sounds of nature, and you're welcome to close your eyes and just listen to nature, or you're welcome to watch the photo montage that I created using some of my abstract nature photographs as well as some of my additional nudes, in case you haven't had enough of those. But on the flip side, I would simply like to close my words with saying, I long to see you naked, really naked, wearing only your soul and your true nature. So here we go.
Wow, that was beautiful and very powerful. Thank you so much, man. Wow. Whew. First, first of all, I want to say that we're extremely grateful and honored to have a young person who is truly involved and dedicated to the cause of climate change. We thank you so much. Kaja Andrick is a sophomore climate activist from Dreyfus School of the Arts and a core member of Palm Beach for Planet. She writes for her school news magazine, The Muse, and also loves to write slam poetry. In her free time, she reads, rides her skateboard, and plays drums in the all-girl band Watching Paint Dry.
I would like to thank my science teacher, Mrs. Pettick Howard, as well as the state of Florida's Cream Literary Alliance for giving me the chance to speak tonight. My name is Kaya Andrick, and I'm a sophomore at Dreyfus School of the Arts. I go there for communications, so I'm going to give a speech. I'm also a core member of the Palm Beach for Planet organization, whose motto is Saving Earth, Starting Local. Just last month, we organized West Palm Beach's first ever climate strike. Our best case scenario was 50 people showing up, so you could imagine our jaws were on the floor when 500 came. Actually, the first time our jaws were on the floor was when we had to register with City Hall and found out that our permit would cost $800. I'm only 15. My only job is saving the earth. It doesn't pay. Our main goal as a student-led organization is to mobilize the youth in our generation, and especially in high schools, to be able to protest and raise awareness for the planet. Palm Beach County School District has 23 high schools, and our goal is to see participation and striker turnout from every one of them. One thing we found out from our small movement is that you really can't be neutral in this debate or in politics at the moment regarding our Earth. It's either that you look to science for how swiftly we have to act, or that you'll sit in your house until it floods. Because that's Florida's trajectory in 40 years from right now. Greta Thunberg, a 16-year-old Swedish climate activist who's at the very forefront of the climate strikes, brought this up in recent speeches. How even if our carbon footprint is slashed in over half of what it is right now, there's still a 1 in 2 chances that we'll still be seeing a domino effect of climate catastrophes, which we won't be able to stop. It's unfortunate that our generation is left with this mess. If I could choose, I would be at a haunted house with my friends right now, the original plan. Instead, I'm also advocating for the class of 0000, not 2022. And if you're a high school student, you can join in demanding a zero carbon waste earth from politicians campaigning in the 2020 elections. Salutatorians and valedictorians are using their speeches to advocate for our planet. We don't even have our high school graduation speeches to ourselves anymore. On behalf of Palm Beach for Planet and the class of 0000, I hope you choose to listen to science. This is not a fight for just high school students, but everyone, including you. This is not an age or a political issue, but a moral issue. Either you want to help us save the earth, or I hope you know how to swim, and hope you know that your lavish and fraudulent lifestyle that is spending a non-existent carbon budget is robbing me and my friends and your kids and your grandkids of a future we already fear we won't have. Mrs. PH will help us, and we're going to keep striking. Thank you. As Greta says, we'll see you on the streets.
Gosh, it's hard to say anything after that. We're just so honored and thrilled that we were able to make that happen. I just want to share really quick a kind of funny story too, because all of this came together in a very strange way, very quickly and very easily. And when I reached out to my good friend Mary Pettick Howard, who is a teacher at Dreyfus, I said, I need some connection to a teenager or somebody that is involved in this. And she said, oh my gosh, this young person came to my desk right at the time I was asking her. So it was really a beautiful thing that it connected with you. So thank you, Kaya. Our next speaker tonight is David Spielberg. David Spielberg was a commentator for National Public Radio, a columnist for the New Haven Register, and a research scientist for the petrochemical and air pollution control industries. He was adjunct faculty at Southern Connecticut State University and New Haven University, and science chairman at the Benjamin School for 16 years. While retired, he is working on his 4th novel. David Spielberg.
First, I think Roxanne convinced me. Oh, no. Okay. It must be the teacher in me, but there will be a test after this. To set the scene, the year is 2045. James and Sylvia Marshall are high up in the World Federation organization chart. The Federation licenses the technology for energy from controlled nuclear fusion, but time for the conversion to this alternative energy source has run out. Sylvia woke, gasping for breath, crying out to James lying beside her. It was 3:12 a.m. "Sylvie, what is it?" he said, putting his arm around her. "Hush, I'm here, it's okay. It's okay," he repeated, trying to comfort her and bring her from wherever she had gone in her sleep, back to the present moment, and with his arm around her. Sylvia pressed her face to his chest and warmed to her husband's familiar embrace. Gradually, she calmed down, but the vision that jolted her from her sleep was still vivid in her memory. "Oh, Jimmy, it's just too terrible. I see it so clearly." James Marshall held her close. He realized that Sylvia had pushed past, across the barrier, that protective wall that allowed her to function in the midst of tragedy. "Darling, what will become of Jonas? It's all so unrelenting. We go through the motions, pretending, but there's really no hope. It's all crumbling around us, and we adapt because that's what we do. But the horror is still there," she sobbed. James gently pushed her from him. "Come on, Syl, let's go talk in the living room. I'll fix us a couple of drinks." He took her hand and led her unresisting from the bed. He guided her to the couch and waited until she settled in. Then he went to the liquor cabinet and prepared 2 scotches. He returned to Sylvia, gave her a glass, and sat down beside her. He said nothing for several minutes, letting her quietly sip her drink. "How can you stand it?" she finally asked him. He gathered his thoughts, not wanting to help his wife and not push her further into despair. "You know, the traveling I do for the Federation makes me a kind of professional witness to the impact of global warming. Sylvia, I love you and Jonas more than anything else in my life, and I worry just the way you do about our future and Jonas's future. But the only way I can do my job is to take a restrained view, a philosophical view, I guess. So many millions of people are already suffering so much from global warming that my life, our lives, I don't know, not less important exactly. I don't mean that." James held his wife closer. "I just go day by day by day, doing my job, Sylvie, and in my life with you and Jonas. If I drift into thinking about the future, then I put that little devil back in the box where I keep it. I just put it back in that box and move on with my life." Sylvia sat with her head bowed, her shoulders slumped, not speaking. Finally, James asked, "What's happening that brought on this sudden dread?" "Well, you know, it's the Thwaites Antarctic ice shelf collapse that just changed the whole politics of stopping fossil fuel extraction. It doesn't matter anymore if we stop extraction gradually or abruptly or never. Antarctica was the shit, and it has really hit the fan." Sylvia gave a deep sigh. "Basically, we're fucked, and I don't see how there is any bright future for any of us." Sylvia finished her drink in one gulp. She handed her empty glass to James and held up her pointer finger, showing one more. Rising quickly, James prepared another round for both of them. Sylvia swirled her refilled glass, watching the motion of the 2 ice cubes. It helped her focus. Jimmy, I can't be as philosophical as you when we're talking about our son. It's like I'm watching him catch a fatal disease. I want to protect him, to rush him to somewhere safe. Except there is nowhere safe. Don't you think I feel the same way? James said. What good does it do? James sipped his drink. Hey, Jonas's birthday is coming up. Let's go somewhere. No, I can't just turn this off. She moved away slightly so she could look directly at her husband. We had such high hopes in the beginning, she said, with the formation of the World Federation, science to the rescue. Well, it didn't turn out that way. The problem, it's just too big. There's nowhere to look anymore for new ideas. Her eyes watered up. The hopelessness, it's just too painful to bear. James was out of comforting comments and remained silent. Sylvia finished her second scotch. I need another way of looking at this, something that makes more sense than just that we're screwed. She thought for a moment and then continued, I can't just stumble through this with no explanation, no theory. I've been thinking about the Gaia principle lately. I don't understand, James said. You don't believe that Earth Mother nonsense, do you? Now, I think I do. I've been thinking everything that's happening is like a curse for our bad behavior, our abuse of Earth. I've been seeing this endless stream of catastrophes as Earth getting revenge on us for abusing it so. It's what woke me up, the horror of it all. But Gaia, Earth as a whole, can possibly act with intent. I know, believe me, I know you think it's too anthropomorphic. I used to think so too, that it's crazy to understand what's happening as somehow an intentional act by nature. James shrugged his shoulders. Go on, he said. I'm reaching here now, Jimmy, because I need a theory. I'm just thinking out loud. Let's say, just for argument, let's say, what if the Gaia principle is true? What if Earth and everything in and on it are components of one big organism, Gaia? Darling, as I see it now, maybe everything that's happening, all these catastrophes, are because one of the interacting parts of Gaia, us, has knocked the whole thing out of balance. All the terrible things we're experiencing is simply the entire organism trying to establish a new, favorable equilibrium. She paused, smiling at the thought that came to her. It's just Gaia working to preserve life. Gee, Sylvie, whatever gives you comfort. James finished his drink and thought, tomorrow will be just another day. Thank you.
This is recycled saris. Feel better about that. Several years ago, I wrote an essay about living without a car in Pittsburgh. It was produced by the Creative Nonfiction Foundation. I'd like to read a bit from it that didn't survive the final edits because I think it illustrates something important and interesting for tonight. 9 years ago, one May evening in the suburb of Pittsburgh, my son Matt and I walked a few blocks to get pizza. Soft yellow sunlight on its way past the horizon slanted through the trees. A light breeze tickled my skin on my sleeveless arms. I should have a sweater, I said. This is nothing, Matt said. This is balmy for Pittsburgh. I can't take the Florida heat, I said. Remember when we first moved there? The rain cooled things off every afternoon in the summer like clockwork. Global warming is disturbing. I'm not sure I believe in global warming, my son said. I wrote about my shock at the statement in my journal that my intelligent 20-year-old son could say such a thing. Yet when I asked him about this conversation, he remembered it differently. He said I was the one who said it was hard to believe in global warming when you're feeling a breeze. He reminded me that he thought, as a scientist, that he'd never say such a thing. It's possible I heard him wrong. Maybe he was commenting on what he thought he heard me say. Either way, our opposing memories are a murky soup, an apt metaphor. The problem is not me, it's you. Many of us think, I'm aware of the problems, I'm aware of the risk. It's those other people who are not taking climate change seriously. It's the corporation's fault. It's the government's fault. Anyone's but mine. Where the problem feels too large to deal with, so we ignore it. The science, too dire. Tonight, we gather under this phrase, things fall apart, at a crucial time in our history. Dr. Kate Marvel, who works for NASA, says, as a climate scientist, I'm often asked to talk about hope. Climate change is bleak, the organizers always say. Tell us a happy ending, give us hope. The problem is, she says, I don't have any. Later, she says, we need courage, not hope. Courage is the resolve to do well without the assurance of a happy ending. Yet, I would argue with her. Look around you. Look, we have a crowd. Look at the attention climate change is now receiving in the TV and the media. Look at what Kaya has done. Gail Bradbrook, co-founder of the International Social Movement, predominantly a protest group called Extinction Rebellion, says climate change asks us to step into service and be willing to do the things that just might make a difference. It asks us to make sacrifices. This is a big emotional shift. When hope dies, action begins. After witnessing writers sharing their work, a young activist presenting her thoughts, an artist challenging us to connect with nature, we leave you with some concrete actions you can take. I would like to thank the Mayor's Office of Sustainability. When I was in the early stages of planning this event, just thinking about it, after Roxanne had popped into my head, I received this little flyer in my utility bill. Perhaps some of you got it. And it says free conservation program. So I called, and they said, of course, we'd be happy to. So Penny Redford is the Climate Change and Resilience Manager for the City of West Palm Beach. She has been in this job since the inception of the program 10 years ago. Please welcome Penny Redford.
Well, I just have to say how awe-inspiring all of the speakers have been tonight and how they have touched me. I just want to thank all of you one more time. I also want to say, what a hard act to follow. I hope that I can also touch your heart and your conscience, but it's going to be probably from a little more practical sense and look at some education and some things that you can do that we all can do to make a difference about this subject that we're talking about tonight. So what is sustainability? Does anyone want to just shout out what they think that is? Sustainability?
Without any added stuff to exist.
Okay. Anyone else?
Balance of people, profit, and planet.
That's a good one. I've used that one before too. Anyone else?
A system that does not destroy itself.
Absolutely. So what we're really talking about with sustainability, and we use a lot of words for talking about climate change. It's sustainability, it's resilience. They all sort of have a little difference meaning, but are used sometimes interchangeably. We're talking about the future and what our future is really going to be. You know, what are we leaving? What are we experiencing now? What are we leaving for our children, for our future generations, for the earth? And yes, you know, there's a lot going on. I am hopeful. I am courageous, or I would not be in this job, although I will tell you that it can be a little difficult sometimes when your job is to keep on top of all of the sustainability, the advances, or not, you know? So I try and be hopeful and courageous. So here's where some of the education comes in. So air pollution. You know, climate change, if greenhouse gas emissions were purple, we'd all be worried about it, right? Because I don't know that we'd want to breathe all of that in. But since it's not, we sometimes don't think about air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions as being some of the same things. There are up to 52,000 people a year in the United States that die because of exposure to emissions from power plants. You know, there are volcanoes, there are earthquakes, there are dust storms, there are all kinds of things that can cause air pollution, but so are our vehicles, a lot of the electricity, the sources of electricity that we have, and those are things that we need to think about. So, yeah, do we think about all of these things? There's industry, agriculture. You know, are we doing the right thing with agriculture? Are we trying to be sustainable with agriculture, or are we just trying to produce? Are we caring about the soil and what's going to happen in the future, or are we looking at the short term? I could pick any one of these graphics here, and yeah, we need to be thinking about all of them. And it's not just about air pollution or energy. What about plastic? For those of y'all who came a little bit earlier, you may have seen I had some reusable plastic bags and some bamboo utensils and metal straw, all things reusable to help us get away from single-use plastic. And I say single-use plastic because it's almost impossible to not have plastic in our lives. I'm holding plastic. I'm talking into plastic. You know, I mean, but we do what we can do. And I guess that's one thing that we all need to think about when I talk about climate change. And even when I talk to my team, I say we're all human. And I am more human than most. So even though I am the climate change and resilience manager for the city, it doesn't mean that I do everything perfect. It means that I try every day to do what I can do that day. So when we talk about, you know, thinking about plastic, we have 9 million tons of plastic that gets into our oceans every year. It just blows your mind, right? And what is happening with that plastic? Our city just implemented a single-use plastic straw and stir ban. And, you know, yay, thank you. I mean, we've had people say, well, it's only a straw, said 9 billion people, right? Or they say, well, our solid waste authority burns. We've got a waste to energy facility, so who cares? Well, not all of those straws are getting into the waste stream. A lot of them are getting into our oceans, our environment, our communities. Everything that we have right now has microplastics in it, seriously. They have found when they melt the snow in Antarctica, there are microplastics. Your table salt probably has microplastics. So what is happening? We're not even, our food eats microplastic. We eat that food, and now we have microplastics. So we really need to think about what we're doing to our environment. And certainly, when you think about the ocean, I know I'm a water person. I love the water. I'm outside all the time. I always, when I was little, thought that the ocean was boundless. It was the ocean, right? Now we know there are vast areas of the ocean that are deserts. We have fish populations that we have really fished into an unsustainable situation. So again, we need to think about what are our choices. And then rising seas. I will tell you that the city of West Palm Beach, we are lucky because from a topography standpoint, we are much higher than our sister cities to the south, even to the south of Palm Beach County, not even thinking about, Fort Lauderdale or Miami or the Keys. I lived in Miami Beach, well, quite a few years ago. So more than 20 years ago. And I didn't see the water rising on the streets, blue sky flooding like they have now. Miami Beach is spending more than $400 million on pumping and changes to their stormwater system to keep the water off of the streets. $400 million. And then, so for us, I'm not saying that it's not important, it is important. I'm saying that we have a little bit of, maybe a little more time to plan, to see what's worked for other folks in our area, to learn from them and to make great choices. But it's important to make those choices and to make those investments. And then let's think about weather. So we have had so many billion-dollar weather disasters. It's almost like you can't take the time to name them all anymore. We have temperature extremes. July was the second hottest month on record, the hottest month on record, and there's some other really hot months. September was the hottest September and the driest September in our area for 126 years since we've been keeping track. September is supposed to be our rainy season. So for those people who are skeptical about what's happening, just look outside. I really related to the earlier comment about it used to rain every afternoon, 20 minutes, 30 minutes at 3 o'clock, clockwork, cooled things down, everything turned green, the birds, the frogs, it was beautiful. We don't see that anymore right now. We had so many Category 5 hurricanes over the past couple of years. I was in Hurricane Andrew, one of the few Category 5 storms that we had. And then, and then we didn't have any for a while, and then look at what's happened. So I'm asking everyone to pay attention, to think about what is happening around you, and to share that with your friends and your family and your congressmen, congresspeople, men and women. It's estimated that 2 billion people, about 1/5 of the world's population, may be displaced from their homes by the year 2100 due to climate change. We already have seen climate migrants. There are a lot of factors that, even if you look at Syria, make some of the things that have been happening in Syria really related to climate change. Because what happened? There was a drought. The government could not take care of the people. The people were sustenance, they were farmers. They couldn't provide or food for their families, so they moved. So there were mass amounts of people that were moving. And all of these things are things that we may be seeing in the future, but we have to plan now. We have to prepare. And then, of course, we are losing land. Permafrost, going back to the temperatures, Alaska, this past July, 96 degrees in Alaska. First time ever. In Louisiana, there is an indigenous tribe. I'm going to probably say this wrong, but it's the Biloxi Choctaw First Nation. They are the first community that is being wholly moved by the federal government because of climate change. There is so much land lost in Louisiana. It's also succession as well as sea level rise that we're already seeing, even in our own country, some climate change impacts where people are moving, climate migrants. So this is our area, and there is a group that is made up of Monroe, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties that came together about 10 years ago. It's called the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Compact. I've been involved with them from the beginning, as you would probably imagine. And they put out a sea level rise projection, and this is from 2015. So this is they're various, there's sort of the business as usual, then there's the sort of, okay, this is the medium, and then here's a real high level. And we're actually getting ready this December to put out an updated version. But this is what would the city of West Palm Beach would look like at 2 feet of sea level rise over our current levels. And then on this other side is what 4 feet of sea level rise would look like. Yeah, it's not looking too good for the island, but we still have quite a bit of sea level rise, and we are planning for that. So what else is happening? Food, big issue. So as the climate changes, temperatures go up, different types of precipitation, maybe even not getting cold enough temperatures at night can have an impact on our food production. And our food most of our food travels a long distance. So we want to make sure that we're thinking about what climate is doing to our food. And then, of course, the birds, the butterflies, all of the critters that evolved around this. Water. Water's it, guys. It's not gold. It's not anything else. It's water. And if you look at this is a water supply risk index showing 2050. We're sort of in the red here. And most of the country. So we need, even though we get over 60 inches of rain a year, we need to be conscious of our water. It's precious. What else can I say? So now I'm going to talk about, now that I've downer. I'm really not meaning to be that way, but to the point, we can't always sugarcoat everything. We've got to look at facts, and we've got to change what we're doing. So if you have some of those facts, and you can share those with others and keep them up here, so your choices, you can be thoughtful of your choices. So let's talk about what we can do. Does anyone drive an electric vehicle in here? Hybrid? At least a high mileage vehicle? Do you use the Tri-Rail some? Brightline is great. So we just completed an update to the citywide, the community-wide greenhouse gas emission for the city of West Palm Beach. For the first time, usually it's buildings. Buildings are what gives the most greenhouse gas emissions. It's transportation this time. So every time you get in that car, at least think about, can I consolidate trips? Do I have to run out, or can I plot my course a little bit? Can I think about the next time I do get a vehicle? Can I get something that's more sustainable? Had to throw this little bolt picture in here because that's my city car, and our city is trying to transition its fleet to electric vehicles. We have bike share. We encourage everyone to bike and walk, and we also have some other programs to make it more comfortable for you to bike and walk. So what else can you do? Food waste. We throw away so much food. 40% of our food goes in the garbage. I'm guilty. I'm conscious and I'm trying to do better. But we need to think about the food that we waste because there's a lot of energy and resources that goes into that food. So what can you do? Shop locally. Think about if you are eating a piece of fruit that doesn't grow in our hemisphere in the winter, it's coming from probably Chile or somewhere. I'm not saying don't eat fruit, but I am saying think about where it's coming from. And here's the other thing that's happening with climate change. Are any of y'all coffee addicts out there? What about wine? So as our climate changes, those areas that were good producers for the coffee or the wine or whatever the food that you are looking at, it changes. So specifically with wine, there are these little areas that are prime for this, all the expensive wine or whatever. Well, the temperature's changing there, so that may not be good anymore. And coffee, I'm not a coffee drinker, but I appreciate the caffeine addicts out there and know that you are concerned about that too. Every time you spend money, you're casting a vote for the kind of world you want. So please think about that. And I threw this little vote button in because, we also need to think about elections. I try and stay non-political, but at least think about who you are considering voting for. Find out what they think, how they stand on climate change. And so what are some other things that you can do? Just quickly, look at your house. How can you save energy? Lighting, LEDs, convert to that. Programmable thermostats, door weather stripping, save water, high efficiency shower heads. We have a toilet giveaway program in our city because we want people who have older toilets to get a free toilet to save water because there's that water energy nexus. It takes energy to produce that potable water. Gosh, this drives me insane. You order something or you are trying to buy something and there's so much packaging around it. Ugh. There are some companies that give you alternatives so that they will put things in a bag instead of putting everything in a big box. And at least some of the shipments that you might be getting from online, there are greener shipping, and be sure to recycle those things that you're getting. And then what else can we do? Well, yes, I was talking about the reusable silverware, but let's don't use styrofoam. It never goes away. I mean, it just never goes away. And we cannot ban styrofoam in the state of Florida because the legislature preempts us from banning it. The legislature preempts us from banning plastic bags, or they'd be gone. There was bills in the legislature last year in both the House and the Senate that said we could not ban plastic straws, single-use plastic straws. They both passed. It went to the governor and he vetoed it. So there's some hope. There are plenty of things that you can do to try and reduce some of that waste. And I sort of like this. If you bring your lunch, think about all of this you can reuse instead of having that waste. What else can you do? Volunteer. We constantly, all through not just in our area, but also in others, they're cleanups. So you can help clean up what people have not thought or cared about and left behind. Plant a tree. We have a tree giveaway program in our city, 10,000 trees in 10 years. We're at about, I'm not quite sure, 4 or 5 years, and we've given away 6,000 trees, and we constantly do that. Don't you want to just go over to that oak tree and be under there and experience that? I'm sort of with you, beautiful. And we all learned, and everyone learns about reducing, reusing, recycle, but look at the top, refuse. Let's add that R to the list. And do you know what's even the right thing to put in your bins? Go to the Solid Waste Authority website if you're not sure. I love the activism that we have been seeing. It is empowering, and it is making people think. What I stand for is what I stand on. There is no planet B. I'm so impressed with all of the young people. And my team, I have not quite this young, but young people working with me too. And I want them to be out front, not just me, because it's their future. It's my future, but it's their future. They're going to be here longer. We've got to think about our children. I'm so proud of them. And I guess going back to the being hopeful but courageous, we certainly do know that it is all of the small acts. It's every step that you can take by those billion people really does make a difference. So I thank you for all of the steps that you are making. Thank you.
That's you.
Oh, that's me. We thank you so much for attending. We hope you will check out our website. We have several upcoming events for literary folk and writers. We have a writer that's going to give a craft class, Steve Almond, a New York Times bestselling author. We have a book club coming up. There are 5 free books available at the bookseller in Lake Worth, and a lot of other things happening. If you just sign up for our newsletter, there is a little slip outside on the table and a box if you're interested in getting the newsletter from the city, from the Norton, from Roxanne or from the Cream Literary Alliance. You can fill out one paper and just check off what you'd like. I recommend all of those newsletters because I know they're all good. And then we also hope that you'll support our future literary readings by sending in your submissions. If you're a writer, keep an eye out. We do this on a regular basis, and we're looking for good writing. So thanks so much.
Thank you, folks, for coming, and please stick around and chat with the presenters if you want. And the presenters, we're going to take a picture, so stick around. You know what? There's been a lot of doom and gloom, but I think there's also a lot of hope. You know, it's just like one by one, together, right? With this young lady, she's it touched my heart, man. I don't know. It seems like almost impossible sometimes. You know, this whole global warming thing and climate change. But I think you know, step by step, one by one, we can take all these things that are falling apart and hopefully put them back together. Thank you.
Thank you.